sometimes it's a little bit about public ignorance, might be too strong of a word, but lack of public awareness. Then you also have the issue of politicization. People get just too wound up with the history and they tend to lose perspective that, yeah, it's something in the past.
The Massachusetts flag, for instance, is very interesting. It comes about from the insignia, which I think came about, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Massachusetts Bay Colony, correct?
Yes, so the 17th century, which depicts a barely dressed Native Americans who is covered with some leaves, and then a speech bubble comes out of his mouth and it says, come over and help us. And I've been showing this flag or this insignia for years, for like 3 decades at this point, to my students, and they always get a kick out and they're like, "Ooh, this is bad." Yeah, and so this is the root. We have had several insignia or state flags since then. But in 1895, there was sort of a reintroduction of a Native American themed flag in Massachusetts again.
Above the Native American on the flag, which seems less offensive than what you described, is a sword that, from what I understand, is kind of indicative to the kind of weapon that the Pilgrims used, Miles Standish used, he being the military, I guess, officer or director of Plymouth Plantation.
Yes.
Do you find that disturbing?
Yeah, I mean, the current seal is disturbing for other reasons. Edmund Garrett, who designed the seal, put a lot of thought in the way he designed the seal. And he used the sword, even though the sword is not a Puritan design, it's like bended. So that's a later design because the whole outside of the flag was like reapplied from a different seal. But the sword above the Native American hat is very disturbing because the handle of the sword is based on that of Miles Standish. But also when you look at the body of the Native American, so the body itself is based on that of a Native person who was unburied in Winthrop, Massachusetts. But the head that Garrett used was that of a model from Montana in the 19th century, or for somewhere out west. So there's different claims. Some say it's based on a model from an Anishinaabe model from the Midwest. The other claim it's a model from Montana. But to make matters worse, you have like this disjointed, like Frankensteinian, as some people call it, like head on end. Then you put the sword above it. And I understand some people say, yeah, well, but it's a military hold that doesn't necessarily mean it's cutting it off, but it's just bad PR. I mean, any company that would be stuck with a corporate logo like that, they'd be this fast in changing it. And sort of, yeah, go ahead, sir.
No, it's very interesting because, why not use a model of a Wampanoag, a Native American, or Penobscot, or Narragansett? Why are we going all the way to Little Bighorn? It makes no sense.
Well, in the 19th century, what people in Massachusetts and all over New England really had convinced themselves is that the local Native American populations, through their intermixing with people of African American descent, of white descent, had ceased to be pure Native Americans. Now, this is the idea of like scientific racism, racial purity, which kind of ends up these moronic ideas in the Nazi concentration camps. And I'm not like making that parallel, but this is sort of the thinking that goes in there.
Now, in Arlington, we have the Dallin Art Museum. Cyrus Dallin, one of the foremost sculptors of American history. He did Appeal to the Great Spirit, which is the huge statue, a Native American statue in front of the Art Museum in Boston. We have what's known as the Menominee Indian or the Menominee Hunter. And it's caused, I'm not going to say a brouhaha, a minor controversy. At least it's provoking discussion and may make a positive step forward in learning about our true, not propaganda, true history. No Spencer Tracy Mayflower adventures,
I think as a society, we need to have more discussion on that, on issues, and it needs to be informed, and it needs to be without yelling at each other. And I'm afraid that sort of this kind of stuff also gets hung up in the culture wars that we've been fighting for quite a few decades, but a discussion that has become really, I use the word nasty.
It's a good word.
In the last 4 or 5 years, probably earlier than that, but it's become really out in the open.